Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club, and I'm beginning a new build today. This is the Estes Mars Longship from there's a sci-fi line they have, mostly looking at like near future colonization of Mars kind of thing. So this is kind of a mid-level kit. It's got 24 millimeter motors in it, so it's going to fly on D's and E's, and it's got a good sci-fi design. So let's break it out and see what we got here. So the initial thing I guess we'll do here is, oh, there's a lot of stuff in this box. I am going to quickly sand. There isn't much balsa to this, but we'll sand down the balsa that we need here quickly, at least to get started. Always a good first step. Naturally, too, I usually put down a little bit of wood here to try to clean, or not wood, newspaper to clean up the mess. So, a quick sand. This is already starting to fall apart, I can feel, so, I'm not trying to get this perfectly smooth, but I am trying to get any particular nastiness in the wood removed. And if they're obvious, sometimes it's fuzzy, kind of furry in places. I do want to get rid of that. But definitely not trying to get this nice and smooth. It's not going to be finished by any sense of imagination. Just a good initial sand. And I do want to do this while it's still in the balsa sheet. Makes it a lot easier. There's a lot less it's really hard to sand this stuff down. At least I think it is once you've already got it glued in place. And this is quick. And I can use a sanding block, which, by the way, I actually bought one, right? Because it's a bit more ergonomic. It's easier to use. Feels, it's not rough on the hands. But this beats cutting a piece of sandpaper and sanding that way, or stapling some sandpaper to a wood block. I mean, you can do that. It's free, basically, I guess, if you have the wood, but I'd rather spend a few bucks on one of these guys and save my hand. So, actually, you know what? I think for the time being, we'll just let this sit, because we're not going to need it for a little bit anyway. And I don't want to lose the pieces more than anything else. Alright, so what I am going to do is I'm going to start in on the motor mount. So there are a lot of pieces to this. So that's what I need out of the first bag. And the second bag ought to have the rest of the components here, so we'll snip this off quickly. You can see we've got a lot of nice plastic detailing too. And it's bags within bags. I mean, I guess that's good that you're not going to lose pieces, but it does tend to make a bit of a mess. Alright, that bright orange one, that's a spacer, so we can go between D's and E's, which is always nice to have. And the rest of this, well, we can stow it. Oh, there's one other thing that I do need, actually. There is a cardstock piece here that has some detailing, but it also has some adapters here to fit the tube, so we'll need those. We need what, all three of them? Yeah, all three of them. Alright, so I'm just going to punch these out with my fingers. You can certainly use a hobby knife to do this, and you probably should, but I generally don't bother, because the burrs on these are usually pretty minimal, and the laser cutting is nice enough so that you can easily just pop, the remaining bits. Just be careful, don't push too hard, and if it is fighting you, break out the knife, because you don't want to deform these if you can help it, which you can. You can help it by not not using your hands. Alright, so that's all the stuff that we need. I do need my ruler, of course, because I got to do some measurements on this, and I need a pencil, so we'll break that out. Alright, so on the main body tube, or not body tube, main motor mount tube, I need to make a bunch of marks. I need to make a mark at 1 inch. So there's our inch. I need to make a mark at 2.5 inches. So that's 2.5. And I need to make a mark at 3 1/4, which is there. I'm going to need to make some other marks, so I'm going to do that right now too. This is a spacer, so it's going to tell us how far in we need to get the motor, the engine block, and I need to make a mark here at 1/2 inch. Alright, probably won't need the ruler, at least for a little bit, although I say that, I'll probably need it like right away. Alright, so anyway, the first thing that I'm supposed to do is break out my hobby knife and make a slit at that 3 1/4 inch mark. I am actually not going to do that just quite yet. And I'm not going to do that just quite yet because this spacer is going to go quite close to this mark when it gets pushed in properly. So I want to actually take the time to get this in the right place. So if I happen to put this right on top of the cut, I'm going to have to make the cut again. And that's kind of a waste of time. So let's try to avoid that. So I'm going to break out a piece of wood scrap. I'm going to break out my wood glue. And I'm using, for this particular job, this is my go-to wood glue. It's strong and it sets pretty quickly, but not terribly quickly. And I don't really need, I don't need this to be super quick. So I'm going to load up my dowel here, and I'm just going to kind of estimate. I'm going to try to put it in front of that mark, a little bit in front of that mark. And again, I'm estimating this. I am not, geez, that wasn't anywhere near enough glue. I'm not measuring this because I'm going to push this through the glue, right? So long as I get it in front of where it ought to be, it doesn't really need to be all that precise. The extra glue will just go along for the ride, and that's fine. Alright, so I put it in the short end because it's closer. The motor mount, then I'm going to grab the push spacer, and I'm just going to push it in until I get to that mark. Make sure you take this out. This is garbage. We don't need that. Although I do keep them from time to time. But make sure you take that out. Do not leave that in. If you leave it in, you won't be able to put the motor in because it's where the motor goes. It's the size of the motor. That's why we have it in the first place. Alright, so while I'm doing that, now would be a good time to make this cut. Hopefully, we can actually, I'm going to stick my finger in here and smooth out the excess glue just a little bit. It's a little that we don't need. Now I'm going to try. Now I'm going to gently push here, and if I feel like I'm cutting right into that motor, the engine block, I'm going to stop because, you know, I'm not going to get, I don't want to cut through the engine block. I can if I really wanted to, but it wouldn't really be very helpful. So I'm quite confident that I'm hitting right in the middle of that. It's, well, it's close, you know, because I can feel where it is, and I think I'm just to the side of it. Yeah, there we go. And that was too big of a cut, but it doesn't really matter all that much. Just so long as you punch through and you can get the hook here through that hole. Because we're going to hold the hook in using another approach, not just the fact that the slit is small. Alright, so that's good. The last couple things we need to do, we need to put this is going to go kind of mid way around this. I just have it eyeballed right now in no particular place. I'm going to put the glue where it belongs. And then the other two, well, we've got 3 of these rings, and I'm going to need them. So one of them is going to go in front, well, right here, pretty much at the back. One with a notch in it. Oh, no, these are different. Okay, so the instructions say there's one with a deep notch, that's this one with a shallow notch, that's this one, and one with no notch. The no notch one goes at the very end, apparently, because, oh yeah, they're going to be 3. That's interesting. So the deepest notch, it says to push it down the other way, but I'm going to bring it up this direction instead, because that's a lot easier to do. Like so. And just be careful with this because these are surprisingly thin. Not the cardstock, but the amount of cardstock you have. You know, it's only maybe 1/4 of an inch. So we want to be careful with that. Anyway, this is going to go at the 1-inch line. This is going to abut right against it. And then the shallow one is going to go up at our, this one, the 2.5 mark. And then the last one's going to go right at the end. So I'm going to get these basically in place first, and then I'm going to worry about the glue. This actually would be easier if I didn't have the hook on right now, I think. But just do be careful, you know, gently push it on, and if, you know, you can always slide it down once you have it in place. And if it is giving you a lot of trouble, then I think, you know, consider sanding it. All right. Also make sure that you are pushing, you know, when you get to the hook, make sure that the groove is lined up with it, because otherwise it's not going to slide. There we go. There was a little bit of extra glue on here, probably because I was not careless exactly, but I wasn't as fastidious as I could have been. This last one's probably going to be a little rough. That's not too bad. Right, I'm going to get this past where it ought to be, and then I'm going to work it back, because this should go right at the end. Alright, so we're basically in place here. So I'm going to, this by the way, save this for launch day because you don't need it for a while. I'm going to put a couple rings of glue. I'm going to put the first one here at 1 inch. And, oops, got my finger in that, that's annoying. I'm going to slide this down carefully or break it. Well, that's not great. Yeah, so I snapped that. Remember how I was saying be careful about that? Yeah, well, that's why. This is not the world's biggest problem. I mean, it's not great, but I have glue here anyway. So I'm just going to hold this for a couple moments. The little tear that I made, yeah, that's incredibly thin. That's like a 1/16 of an inch worth of paper, so that is not strong. The excess glue here should actually help bond that back together. But ultimately this is going inside the rocket anyway, and there's going to be glue there as well. So I'm not terribly concerned about it. I mean, it was careless, but you know, it's not like I snapped the fin clean in half. Alright. Now, this is actually going to get reinforced anyway by this gray part, so yeah, that's not the world's biggest problem. I do want to make sure I have this 1 inch thick though, and it's not. I was pretty sure I was coming up short. So I'm going to adjust this whole thing down a little bit. There we go. Now it should be good. It's 1 inch in. Alright, so there isn't a whole lot of glue on here right now. I'm going to reinforce this by putting a ring around like so. This is probably more glue than I actually want, but you know, whatever. And then I'm going to use my finger to smooth it out, and I'm going to make a fillet here. That again is probably going to reinforce this, and in fact it's kind of silly that they put the notch here at all, honestly, because it's, first of all, it's filled with glue, and second of all, it's not going to move very much anyway. I have a little extra engine hook here. I'm going to try to clean that out so it does have a little bit of flex to it. There we go. Alright, that's one. Let's hope we have better luck with the others. They should be a little bit tougher because the gap for this one is smaller, so it should be a little bit more robust. And I got it past the touchy part anyway, one would think. So just be a little more careful. Slide it up slowly. And again, I'm pushing it through the glue, so you know the fact that it's only really on one side shouldn't make much of a difference. All right, That looks pretty good. Ideally, you want to have these perpendicular. This one was easy to check because this ring is, pretty wide, so it's not going to wobble. This one, on the other hand, though, I check it by just spinning it in my hands like this, and it should make basically a straight circle. If it's crooked like this, it'll wobble like a loose wheel as you watch it spin. That's how you check. So I got the glue there. I didn't put a fillet on the underside here. I probably should. I'll put a fillet on both of these since I'm thinking about it. Again, I'm going to try not to block up the little gap there for the engine hook to move. But if I do, again, it's not that big of a deal. And I dislodged the broken part again. Oh, that's annoying. All right. All right, there we go. All right, last but not least, I have a little bit of excess glue here on my finger, so I'm going to use that to, actually I had a lot of excess glue on my finger. I'm going to use that to lay down most of this layer. And that's probably going to be plenty, to be honest. There was a decent amount of glue. To get this flush, I'm going to just carefully, and again, I really don't want to break this again because that was pretty dumb. I'm just going to gently coax this down. And once it gets to the very end, well, the table is pretty flat, so the ring should be flat. This, again, is one of the easier ones to make sure that you have on perpendicular. Looks pretty good. Just wipe things off a little bit. And it's not quite down the whole way, so let's push down a little bit farther. I am making a bit of a glue mess here, I gotta be honest. I'll clean off the mat at some point, but I'm also making a bit of a glue mess on this thing. Fortunately, it's an internal part, so I have to say I do not particularly care. If you want, you could leave a little bit of space here, that way you can put a fillet on both sides, but I don't think that's going to be all that essential for this rocket. And the last fillet then, like so, and that takes care of the motor mount. So that needs to dry. That was not my best performance ever, I guess, but it's taken care of. So that's it for now, and I'll see you in whatever comes next for part 2. Thanks for watching.